to see you guys.
We're ready, Liz? Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is October 9th. The time is 2 p.m. and I want to call the Financial Oversight and Audit Committee meeting to order. We do have Representative Chavez, Representative Maldonado Rocha, Representative Nino, and myself, Representative Acevedo, here for the meeting. If we could start with the pledge. Rep Chavez, do you want to lead us off? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll get right to it. We have item number 1, approval of minutes for the Financial Oversight and Audit Committee meeting of September 11, 2025. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, this passes unanimously 4-0. We'll move on to item number 2. Discussion and action to reschedule the November FOAC meeting to Friday, November 14th, 2025. I placed this item on the agenda. Our meeting is scheduled for November 13th, but right now we are working on the UNICEF USA Child Friendly Cities Initiative launch that will be taking place on November 12th and 13th. And they're all-day events, so I wanted to ask FOAC members if we could move that meeting to Friday instead of having it on that Thursday, so it's a day later. And we'll be discussing the Weaver audit. It's very likely that we'll discuss that before it gets to council the following week.
Motion to approve.
Will it be at 2 p.m.?
We could probably do it at a little earlier since it's a Friday. So I'll work with Liz, maybe an 11 a.m. meeting or something like that, if that's okay. Okay, we could do 11 a.m. Liz. Okay, thank you, Rep. Nino. So there's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, hearing none, it passes unanimously 4-0. And then we'll go to item number 3, discussion and action on the update to the City of El Paso investment policy. The Office of the Comptroller, Luis Meyer.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right, very good. So item 3, discussion and action on the update to the City of El Paso investment policy. The investment policy falls under Goal 6, set the standard for sound governance and fiscal management. The Texas Public Funds Investment Act governs the investment of public funds. The Act requires a written investment policy. It also requires that the investment policy be reviewed and adopted annually by resolution of the governing body, in the case of the City of El Paso City Council. And per the city's investment policy, the FOAC must approve and recommend the policy to City Council for adoption. For this year, we have no proposed changes.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, and when was the last revision that you made? Was
October 2024.
Okay,
So
so
it's required to be brought forth annually.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve this. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, this passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to item number 4, discussion on fiscal year 2024-2025 audit plan, fourth quarter updates. We'll give it to you, Miguel.
Good afternoon. There you go. Is it? Put in presentation mode. IT can bring up the presentation. Perfect. Today we'll be discussing, good afternoon, my name is Miguel Montiel with the Internal Audit Department. Today we'll be discussing the fourth quarter update. So this is the audits and projects we worked on between June 1st and August 31st, 2025. And we also have what we do at the end of every fourth quarter of every fiscal year. We give a recap of what we did during the fiscal year. So you'll see some charts and some other graphs at the end of this presentation, towards the end of the presentation. So the reporting statement here, here we just state that the Chief Internal Auditor must periodically report to the Financial Oversight and Audit Committee and senior management on the internal audit activities, purpose, authority, and performance relative to its audit plan. Independent statement. Here, this pretty much just states that we remain independent and that the FOAC committee reviews and recommends for approval by City Council the internal audit charter, the annual risk-based audit plan, and you also receive quarterly updates to the audit plan. Okay, so here's a high-level summary of what we did between September 1st, 2024 and August 31st. So we completed 15 audits. There's still 7 audits planned and in progress. So the total number of audits is 22 for the year, and I'll show you what those are. And then we have a little chart here. So we completed about 75% of what we set out, our goal for the year. Those 5 audits are still in progress at 25%. So here's the listing of the audits that have been completed. You can see the list there. There's one towards the end, Code Enforcement Audit Division, or Division Audit. That audit is still in progress. We began that audit in the middle of August, so we're in the progress. It's in progress. We're about 50% done on it, and you'll see this come back up as a carry forward audit when we discuss the audit plan and later on today. Here's a second page of audits in progress, completed. Here you can see the 380 agreement that we'll be discussing today. We haven't started the follow-up, so we're waiting on today's discussion on that item. And then these audits and the last page, these are in progress and a couple of them are complete. And the last one there listed is a single-family owner-occupied renovation program. You see that as a carry forward in the audit plan, which we'll be discussing later on today. For the fourth quarter, we received, this is regarding the employee hotline, we received 10 calls. 2 calls remain open as of 8/31/2005. And those go through, these 2 calls went through HR, so they're going through their process of investigation. And once they're closed out, we'll update our account here. For tax office, I know you've seen in the past during City Council, you'll see tax office refunds come up for approval. We review those before they come to you. So during the fourth quarter, we reviewed 29 separate tax office refunds. Client surveys. These are the surveys we sent out during the fourth quarter. These are for projects that were completed during that time. So you can see how many surveys were sent out, how many were received, and percentage completed. And any questions you may have?
Any discussion from anybody? Yeah, Rep. Charles.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, how are you?
Hello.
So for the ones that say in progress,
Yes, ma'am.
When will those be completed?
These should be completed, and we'll discuss these during the audit plan item on today's agenda. But they'll be completed this fiscal year or this first quarter of the fiscal year. A lot of them are on the tail end of completion, so we budgeted what we think is going to be whatever's going to take a number of hours to take to complete those audits. So you'll see that in the audit plan coming up.
Okay. And the ones that were canceled, can you just give us a reason behind those cancellations?
Sure. The executive here you can see on the screen, the executive vacation request and sick leave project. That's something that was scheduled on the audit plan. This one, we began doing research on it, just like we do any other audit. And this one, we determined we cannot verify with 100% accuracy. The objective was to review, of course, as executive vacation request and leave to see, okay, so somebody requested, an employee requested this many of hours of sick leave or vacation. Can we prove those are the actual amount of hours that somebody took? Did somebody take time off without entering into Chronos, right, to request a leave? There's nothing we could have done to compare, that people leave and not enter into the system. So that one was, I believe it was brought back to the audit committee to cancel. So we canceled that one. The city council and city manager's office, P-card and travel review. That one, we're in the process of, we were told there was a conflict of us reviewing our boss's work, right? So we're in the process of hiring a third-party consultant, a vendor, to come in and perform that work. And that will be scheduled for this coming fiscal year 2026.
Yes, and I just wanted to put on record that we're still going to be conducting that one, just not internally.
Yes.
Okay.
And you'll see that when we discuss the audit plan.
Okay. The one on the El Paso Zoo, the financial activity, this is going to be after, or since we've not been working with the El Paso Zoological Society. Is that correct?
Correct, after. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Representative Nino.
Thank you, Chairman. And question for you. I do see some of the audits say the audit code, the year 2023, for example. Those are previous audits that carried on over from the previous annual plans?
Yes, sir. It
Okay.
did.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, no further questions.
And-
I just wanted to.
Excuse me?
I just wanted to verify that and
Yes,
clarify.
and this one in particular, like the pension office, which is fiscal year 2023, we had some, we're trying to obtain data from the vendor, from the pension office, and that took some time. That's why this audit got pushed back a little bit. But
Perfect. And it's just how we'll be reviewing the new audit plan for this next fiscal year, how it has some of the carryover projects. That's the same situation as these, right?
yes, the carry forward audits will have, they'll start with a 2025 because they were scheduled the previous fiscal year 25, yes.
Correct. Thank you.
Miguel, I have a few things. So I'm not trying to get ahead of ourselves on item number 6, but just it's pertinent to these audits where I'm seeing some of them are going to be, not started or in progress. They're carried over into the next fiscal year, which is 2026, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. When do you usually, because I've only been here for 2 cycles, right, or 2 years, when do you usually present the audit plan and when does it get adopted? Like what month?
I know we try to do it as soon as the fiscal year starts. I know there's been some delays in the past, so it's taken, I think the last year, I don't think it got approved till December, or something like that. It's December of 2024. So it took a few months to get it through the FOAC and get it approved.
Okay.
But usually it's soon after, usually September, October is when it gets approved and comes to FOAC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, and we're kind of in this October timeframe right now, but I think what I kind of want to urge my colleagues to consider is really looking at this audit plan for the following year, for fiscal year 27, maybe starting in February or March or somewhere earlier where we're giving you that input. That way it is brought to FOAC in July or August, and we're actually starting the fiscal year on September 1 instead of approving something when the fiscal year is already a month or two in progress, right? Just because as I'm looking at some of these that are moving forward, and I think there's great consideration in terms of why some of them are not started or why some of them are taking a little bit longer. I feel weird saying, okay, they're in progress, but then we haven't adopted the new audit plan. We're still working on this audit plan, and it's already the new fiscal year. So I think cleaning it up would probably be a little bit better.
Yeah, and this happens because, we schedule audits, we estimate audits starting first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, of course, of the fiscal year. Sometimes we don't start an audit till August, which is at the end of the fiscal year. So since they take, 6 weeks or so to complete, that's going to transfer from August to September, maybe completion in October. So yeah,
And that makes total sense.
There'll be a few.
I think it's just calendaring a little bit better that way.
Sure. And
My stress level will decrease just by making sure that we're starting when it needs to
and
start.
ours as well, yes, sir. We'll start sooner, yeah.
And so, just so I'm understanding, some of the carryovers will be the single-family owner occupied renovation program audit, correct?
Sir.
And
Yes,
we're going to talk about that in the audit plan, so I'll leave my comments for that. So that's one. And then the Red Book internal self-assessment, that's two.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then the franchise fee audit with El Paso Water,
Yes.
that hasn't started, and why hasn't
That has not started. We need to meet with our streets and maintenance department. The issue there with the water utility, they pay the city, as far as we know, they pay the city a set amount of franchise fees per year. I believe it's like 4.5 million, something like that. So it's a set amount, but I know we want to do some work on the water meters. There was a concern that, and we haven't substantiated it yet, but there might be a concern where the city might be charged for sewer in locations where there's no restroom facilities, like a park. So that's something we need to reach out to Streets and Maintenance, since they deal with parks and the bills, and get some more information before we start anything. But that's why this one's been kind of on pause until we have those discussions.
Okay, and is that more of a speed bump that you kind of figured out when you started doing some of the field work for this, or can Ms. Mack do something to accelerate the start of this to help facilitate meetings or anything like that?
It's just a bump when we start doing the research, because we do research, of course, before we begin any audit, and that's something that came up and the concern. So I know we spoke to our vendor to see if they can do that type of work, and we still need to reach out to our departments and determine what the actual concern is. Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Mackey, did you?
I was just trying to clarify with Robert, because I don't understand what we're trying to get done on this one. I'm sure I didn't pay attention to this, so I didn't ask you. So as you said, the franchise fee is a flat fee, so we're not auditing that.
Right.
And so we have other fees that we take in that are not franchise fees, and so are we going to change the scope of this so it's very clear about what we're evaluating? I'm not
and
clear.
we're still doing our planning on this, so we still need to meet with Streets and Maintenance and whoever's else is in charge of the bills to pay the water utility to determine what the actual concern is, because this is an item that our previous chief internal auditor was handling, and of course now it's transferred over to us, so we need to just determine what the
The scope is?
be. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but we'll keep in touch. We'll keep you abreast of
Okay,
what's
and
going
we're
on.
actually hiring a energy auditor, so that's going to actually be in climate and sustainability. It's
Okay.
not going to be in the streets.
Okay, something maybe we can work with them. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. And then on the police department cybersecurity audit,
Yes.
why is that one still in progress?
That one, this is the first cybersecurity audit that we conduct, so we're dealing with an external auditor that came in from out of town to do this work. We had a lot of meetings with our IT department, with the police department, and it took some time to get some information from the police department as far as what kind of programs, what kind of software they use. So that was a delay. And then with the change in management within our office, that caused a delay as well. They're on their tail end. I know we asked them for a progress report on Monday, so we should get something from them. I know they were finalizing their results of what they saw, what they reviewed. So we should get something, I'm hoping by the end of the month. I hope we have a draft of the report to be able to present to FOAC.
Okay, and then from what my understanding is, the department doesn't have any cybersecurity expertise, right?
Correct.
And so that's why you got an external person to do
Yes,
that.
sir. Mhm.
Okay. The zoo and the Westside Adoption Center, those are also moving forward to this next audit plan.
Yes, the zoo, actually, we just had our exit meeting, was it yesterday, 2 days ago? So we're in the tail end of that project, where we met with the department and we met with the DCM for that department. We presented the results. We're waiting on, customarily, we give them about 2 weeks to get the management responses from them. So once we get the management responses, we'll incorporate everything into the draft. Then we'll go start the process of bringing it to full act for approval and then council. So that one is on the tail end. So we wouldn't expect to spend too much more time on that this fiscal year. The Animal Services Westside Adoption Center, that one was started August 14th. So that one we're in the middle of field work. So we should be completed within the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. And of course, go through the full act, bring it here to full act for approval and our process.
Okay, so I'm seeing that the last year we carried over 4. This time we're carrying over 7.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, we had an auditor resign not too long ago, and then with our chief internal auditor, yeah, that took away some resources from
Okay.
our departments.
So you had less hours to focus on because you lost 2 people, and
lost 2 people.
you lost those hours when they
Yes, sir.
left.
Mhm.
Okay. I just want the public to understand why we're carrying so many over. You know, the audit plan's a little difficult to explain on how we use this as a map to move a lot of this work forward. The other thing that I wanted to ask you in the report, on page 12, you have audit time per city portfolio, and it says percentage of time per city portfolio fiscal year 2025.
Yes, sir.
And 14% of it is with the FOAC, and then you're spending a lot of time with DCM Bristol, 21%, and DCM Hernandez at 11%. The city attorney's office has a very small percentage,
Yes,
and
sir.
then DCM Cortinas has the 25%. So there's a lot of time that's happening there, and I kind of wanted to understand a little bit more about what you mean by these percentages. Is this how much time you're spending in the audits and the follow-ups? What does that look like?
Yes, sir. So what we do, as you're aware from, I was going through my email. What we go through is, as you see in the audit plan, we budget, 400 or 500 hours, depending on what it is for the audit. So we'll keep track. We have an internal database that we keep track of our time up to every 15 minutes of time that we spend. So we track administrative time, vacation time, and then, of course, audit time that we're working on these audits. So what we do is at the end of the year, we do a breakdown, okay, how many hours did we spend per project and per item, and then we allocate it to each DCM portfolio. And it's just something, this is just for, I guess, more FYI, how we spent our time during the fiscal year.
Yeah, no, and I like it, and I think it's great. I'm just trying to get more of an understanding,
Yes,
like
sir.
your hours. I think there's a lot of confusion that can arise from, we're doing 800 hours for this project. Well, what does 800 hours look like, right?
Yes, sir.
And then I see that you have mayor and council at 1.88% of your time. Does that mean you were meeting with mayor and council like one-on-one, or does that mean council meetings, or can you break that down a little bit
For
more?
mayor and council, I believe the 1.88 came from, we began to do planning on the P card and travel review for the mayors and council. So that is what that time is reflected in the 1.88.
Okay.
And then we were asked to stop, so that's how much we spent. 1% of our time in the whole fiscal year in that project.
Okay, that makes
Yes,
sense.
sir.
I appreciate the clarification. No further questions from me either. Is there any other questions, discussion? No, okay, so this item is not posted for action, so if there's no more discussion, we could move on to item number 5. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 5 is discussion and action on the results of the Economic Development 380 Agreement Monitoring Audit Report A 2023-07. Liz, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Liz De La O. I will be presenting the results of the Economic Development 380 Agreement Monitoring Audit Report. Okay. Okay, so in order to provide some context on this particular audit, I provided a timeline of the audit report issuance. The report was dated April 17th, 2024. We had our exit meeting and received management responses in June 2024. The final report was distributed to council and city management on June 27th, 2024. So at this time, approval from FOAC and city council was not required to finalize the individual audit reports. The audit report was placed on the September 17th, 2024 FOAC quarterly agenda by one of the FOAC members, and the report ended up being deleted from the agenda. So given that the report was finalized and distributed, we did add it to our FY25 annual audit plan. We initiated the follow-up audit in May 2025, but it was not executed due to the concern that the report had been deleted from the September 17th FOAC agenda. So now we're bringing back this report for your official action. The objectives of this audit were to determine if economic development has established an effective monitoring program to ensure that businesses and the City of El Paso comply with Chapter 380 of the Texas Local Government Code, the City of El Paso Economic Development Program Guidelines, 380 agreement payout terms and deliverables, and to review and evaluate the reporting mechanism used by 380 agreement incentive recipients to report economic development, their deliverables or activities for the year. Okay, did I pass it too much? Maybe. There. So the scope of this audit included reviewing 3D agreements as of fiscal year 23 and agreements that were closed as of fiscal year 24. The following samples were selected for review. 7 3D agreements were reviewed for compliance with applicable 3D agreement incentive program policies and procedures. 5 rebates paid to incentive recipients whose 3D agreement included a job component, and 4 agreements that received rebate payments from the city without completing the terms of their 380 agreement and later closed. Let me see. It's frozen. Okay.
Liz, can I ask a super quick question?
Oh, wrong one. Okay, sorry about that.
Can I ask a question? Liz, I have a super quick question, if I may. Can you define closed?
Yes.
Just for the benefit of the public, when it comes to reviewing a 3D agreement, and when you're talking that we're reviewed for proper closure, what is the definition for closure?
Okay, so close could either be completed. The agreement went through the whole process and it was completed. It could be withdrawn, like the recipient can request to withdraw from the agreement, or it can be terminated, and that's because they defaulted on the terms of the agreement.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I went over the scope. Now back to the methodology. So in order to achieve our objectives, we interviewed economic development management and staff. We reviewed the policies and procedures, reviewed the City of El Paso Incentive Agreement Portfolio 2023 Quarter 3 booklet. We reviewed 3 agreements monitoring processes and reporting mechanism. We analyzed a sample of 7 active 380 agreement incentive files. So for this sample, what I did is I provided a breakdown of the population of the 7 agreements that were selected. As of FY23 third quarter, economic development reported 65 active agreements. There was 3 transit-oriented development agreements, 16 sustainable city center incentives, 12 infill, and 34 strategic master agreements. So from the population of the 65, we excluded agreements in default and agreements we had already previously audited during other audits. We then selected a sample of 7 strategic master agreements due to their higher range of incentive packages and due to the majority of the strategic agreements containing a job component. For the next samples, we analyzed a sample of 5 380 agreement incentive rebates issued by Economic Development in FY23. There were 5 companies with a job requirement in their 380 agreement that received a rebate in FY23, and we selected all 5 rebates for review. And we conducted an analysis of the 380 agreements in default that were withdrawn or completed. So at the time, there were a total of 115 incentive agreements that were listed as closed by Economic Development. Further analysis identified the 4 agreements that received a payment without completing the terms of their agreement. So we selected those for review. And we just wanted to note that populations and samples are based on the audit step being performed, and it is common practice for auditors to select different samples based on the audit step. So next, I'll go over the findings. For finding 1, we state that the following revisions were made to the 2021 City of El Paso Economic Incentives Policy. These revisions have a significant effect on the evaluation of incentive agreement applicants and the reporting of incentives to the City Council. Revisions were made to remove requirements included on the previous 2015 incentive policy. The first noted revision to the policy was regarding businesses' financial stability and capacity to complete the project. The 2015 policy required that projects must include solid evidence provided by the businesses that demonstrates the business's financial stability and capacity to complete the project. And the 2021 policy requires documentation upon request. The second noted revision was regarding council review of the policy. The 2015 policy required that the policy be reviewed on a biannual basis, and the 2021 policy review changed to periodic. The third noted revision was regarding reporting to City Council. The 2015 policy required that Economic Development will provide Council with an annual report reviewing the implementation of this policy and the resulting effects of Council's approved incentives under this policy. And the 2021 policy no longer requires an annual report to Council. The process at the time for Economic Development to periodically provide City Council with a high-level presentation on their KPIs was not documented in the policy. So we just recommended that Economic Development should require revisions to the City of El Paso incentives policy be communicated and approved by City Council. Management responded that they are in the process of updating the Chapter 380 program policies. Finding will be incorporated into proposed revisions for the final approval by City Council. I also want to mention that Karina will be providing her own presentation after this one to give you an update on the processes she has put in place since the completion of this audit. For finding 2, a financial analysis is not being performed of all 380 agreement incentive applications. 6 out of 7 380 agreement files reviewed did not contain documentation providing evidence of financial stability of the business to complete the project. 1 applicant did not provide financial information. 2 applicants provided a financial statement that demonstrated that both projects would not have enough income to cover expenses if incentives were not provided. And 3 applications did not contain evidence of providing documentation of the business's financial stability and capacity. So we just recommended that Economic Development should require that a financial analysis is conducted and documented of all 380 agreement applicants to determine the financial stability and capacity of the business to complete the project. In response, Economic Development indicated that they will establish a process for requesting, collecting, and assessing information required to determine the financial stability and capacity of 380 applicants. Financial analysis will be documented and included in status reports unless protected by law or a separate agreement. When a financial analysis is conducted by a third party, that will also be documented. For finding 3, economic development is not providing city council with a true representation of the dollar amount of all incentives provided to 380 agreement recipients and not reporting on actual job counts for each project. A review of the City of El Paso incentive agreement portfolio as of August 23, 2023 identified the following. The actual number of jobs created or retained are not being reported to City Council for agreements with a job component. Only the contractual number of jobs to be created or retained for each agreement were reported and not the actual. The department reported to City Council a total of 5.3 million incentives paid to date for 5 agreements reviewed. The paid to date amount excluded fee waivers and a tax increment reimbursement totaling 1.2 million. So the total amount of incentives for the 5 agreements should have been 6.5 million. For our recommendation, we state that economic development should track and report actual jobs created or retained by 380 agreement recipients, track and report to City Council the actual dollar amount of all incentives paid out to each 380 agreement recipient, both in monetary form and in waived fees, provide City Council with a status report of awarded incentive agreements. So in response, economic development indicated they would provide the status reports of awarded incentive agreements on a regular basis, but not less than once a year. The status reports will include tracking of both contractual and total reported job metrics. Fee waivers are currently tracked in Acela and will be included in the status reports. For finding 4, we state that economic development is not adhering to their incentive agreement contract compliance policies and procedures in the following areas: tracking and updating key dates for 380 agreements, documenting deadline extensions for incentive reimbursement requests to recipients, and processing incentive payments per the deadline specified in each 380 agreement. We recommended that economic development should ensure that a monitoring system is utilized to track key dates for 380 agreements and that it's updated as required, enforce deadlines specified in the 380 agreements for the submission of the incentive payment requests, and process incentive payments in accordance with the deadlines specified in the 380 agreements. In response, economic development indicated that they are implementing Monday.com, a project management software, that they will update standard operating procedures to ensure all agreement notices and extensions are documented, and that the city will process payments in accordance with the timelines stated in the relevant 380 agreements. Finding 5, an analysis of 115 incentive agreements closed as of January 24th, 2024 identified 4 agreements that received incentive payments without completing the terms of their agreement. 2 agreements were identified as not having a recapture clause and received a total of 1.3 million in incentive payments from the city. The city was unable to seek reimbursement of the incentive payments made. 1 agreement was identified as having a recapture clause and received a total of 1.4 million in incentive payments from the city. The agreement's recapture clause only applied if the recipient did not substantially complete the work on any component. 1 agreement was identified as having a recapture clause and recourse was taken to collect the incentive payment from the recipient. So our recommendation is that economic development should require that all 380 agreements contain a recapture clause in the event of an agreement defaulting. The city can recover the amount of incentives granted. In response, economic development indicated that unlike abatement agreements executed under Chapter 312 of the Texas Tax Code, Chapter 380 agreements do not require a recapture clause. Economic development will update standard operating procedures to ensure that consideration is given to a recapture clause in the negotiation of all 380 agreements. So in conclusion, economic development met the audit objectives in the following areas: documenting and receiving approval for the City of El Paso incentives policy, establishing and documenting incentive agreement contract compliance policies and procedures, establishing new businesses in the City of El Paso. They did not meet the audit objectives in the following areas: making revisions to the economic incentives policy that have a significant effect on the evaluation of incentive agreement applicants, conducting a financial analysis of all applicants' business finances, reporting the actual dollar amount of incentives paid out to each recipient, both in monetary form and in waived fees, reporting to City Council on actual job counts for each project, tracking and updating key dates for 380 agreements, documenting deadline extensions for incentive reimbursement requests, processing incentive payments per the deadline specified in each agreement, and requiring that all 380 agreements contain a recapture clause in the event of an agreement defaulting. For our requested action, we are requesting that FOAC accept the results of the 380 agreement monitoring audit report and schedule follow-up audit as part of the FY26 annual audit plan. So I'll take any questions unless you want to proceed with Ms. Brasgala's presentation.
I think this is a lot of information to digest, so let's go to some discussion. I have Representative Nino.
Thank you, Chairman. Liz, thank you so much for the presentation. One thing that you mentioned was that the report was finalized and distributed, right? Now, the action is to accept the results of the Economic Development 380 Agreement monitoring audit, and of course, to schedule follow-up audit. But my question is, this audit is an older audit, right? Since it was part of the audit plan in 2023?
Yes, sir. It was in the audit plan for FY 2023, and we completed it in FY 2024.
Completed in 2024. Now, us accepting this audit today, where I'm trying to get to is, right now we'll see the presentation from Economic Development. How are we going to show that since then policies have been implemented? Is that going to be something that is going to be part of the presentation today, and is that going to be part of the backup? Should have any policies been implemented since then?
So their
Or updated?
presentation is going to go over what has implemented since this audit was issued. And when we do our follow-up audit, we will confirm that those processes have been put in place.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think I was trying to understand as to why the audit got deleted. I know that the media did pick up this audit because it was finalized and distributed, but us taking action is what essentially actually finalizes it. I'm trying to understand that component of it.
So since this audit was finalized, distributed, and then it was deleted, it gave the perception that it was not accepted by FOAC. So now we just want an official action taken by FOAC on this audit.
Perfect.
I'll jump in a little bit and help. I think this was in September of 2024. The FOAC deleted this item and then probably a few other items, if I remember correctly, from the agenda. And when Liz went to start the follow-up audit at the beginning of summer, I want to say maybe in June, if
May
I remember,
2025, yes.
June 2025, they realized that the audit hadn't really been moved forward, and that meant that the FOAC deleted the item, but they didn't say yes or no to it. So it was in this weird limbo. And so as we've been talking through this in the last few months with attorneys, we wanted to bring it for FOAC's consideration and think about what we want to do today, determining on if we move it forward or if we integrate it into the audit plan, or there's just different options on the table that we could discuss more.
Okay, no, thank you for that, and that gives us better perspective because, again, I think for the benefit of the public, it's important to note that even, potential 380 agreements that the current body of the council has potentially adopted or worked on, it's not a reflection of what this audit is also going to take part of, right? We're just really having the conversation of accepting a previous audit that took place a couple of years ago, and essentially, like you said earlier, really accepting it and making it part of the process. But I'll come back. I'll have further questions. Thank you.
Representative Maldonado Rocha.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for the explanation, because my question to Liz was going to be, what happens if we don't accept it? Right? What are the options? And the reason that I bring that up is not because I that's the way that I'm going to vote or not. I haven't decided yet, but I just want everyone to understand that this is required in order for us to move forward in the next step, So this isn't saying, I know Karina will probably come up and say that she's adopted several of these based off of the management's response. I believe there's been about, a year now since this was originally published, correct?
Yes.
So, so I'm looking forward to seeing those updates today. But I just wanted to thank you for bringing it to our attention, and thank you for putting it back on. I had reservations at first. My initial thought was, let's just bring this into the next audit plan holistically versus a follow-up audit. And so, so this answered a lot of the questions when I read the backup and read through it, that I'm looking forward to seeing these adjustments, which I know we've already had several, if not all, have been improved upon. So, so I'm looking forward to the follow-up audit in this next audit plan to see just how successful this is going at this time. So thank you, Liz.
Rep Chavez?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Liz. I just want to follow up on page 9 of your presentation. So where it says the guidelines and criteria from 2021, where it says the project must, number 2, upon request, provide credible documentation that demonstrates the business's financial stability and capacity to complete the project. So from the sample that you've provided, from the sample that you took in this audit, according to that guideline, if I read the audit correctly, 6 out of 7 agreements had no documentation providing evidence of financial stability. Is that correct? From the sample.
Yes, that's correct. 6 out of the 7.
Okay, thank you.
And Liz, something that I was not very clear on when I was reading through the audit, specifically on what Representative Chavez just mentioned, this table on 2015 versus 2021. It's not clear to me why we're comparing 2015 to 2021, and none of us here were here, right? So in 2015, was that adopted by council? In 2021, was that adopted by council? And if the criteria changed in those 6 years, why are we still looking at that criteria and doing a compare and contrast?
So both were adopted by council, and what happens when we do these 380 reviews, we look at the criteria in place, and then sometimes they overlap just because some of the agreements we look at, especially when we look at the rebates, we might be looking into an agreement that was accepted like several years in advance, so we have to look at all of the policies that are in place for that particular agreement.
Okay, I got it. So if there was a 380 agreement, one of the 7 that you looked at that was signed in 2015, you want to look at what was on the books in 2015, and then there was another audit that was signed in 2021, 2022, so that was on the books at that time. So that's kind of why you're doing this compare and contrast, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I guess that could be a little bit more distinct in the report to kind of say this one was 2021, it goes with this policy that was updated, so that's kind of why we have this information that is a finding here, but it's not a finding over here because of what was updated.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes, I
just
understand.
more clarity in that sense. Okay. Any further discussion? Representative Nino.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think, again, for the benefit of the public, I think what sometimes gets confusing on the audit report, it does have an implementation day, it says January 1, 2025. But in the next conversation of the next item where we're talking about the audit plan, it does talk about a follow-up. So the follow-up is essentially going to help determine in regards to the findings, the recommendations, and also the management's responses of what things have taken place since then to ensure that we're within the policy and the recommendations, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, no further. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have any other discussion for now, but I think we could invite Karina up for her presentation.
Thank you all. Karina Bresgala with Economic and International Development. I'd like to thank both the Internal Auditor's Office and FOAC for providing us this chance to give some operational context and a few updates on the improvements that have been made in the about 18 months since this audit report was finalized. I'm joined by our Economic Development Compliance Manager, Alejandra Fuentes, and she'll be going through the majority of the updates. Our compliance team, our finance team, with support from all of our internal departments, do a fantastic job. And as Representative Rocha pointed out, we've implemented several of these items. So I'll briefly go through the 380 incentive program, talk a little bit about negotiations, approvals, monitoring, and then discuss the process updates related to the 5 audit report findings. As a reminder, again, for the benefit of the public, Chapter 380 incentive agreements are authorized by the Texas Local Government Code, which delegates fairly broadly to City Council to establish, administer, and fund programs in order to meet the economic development goals for the municipality. Locally, the 380 program is adopted by City Council, as you all asked and clarified, and the adopted policy outlines the way that our incentive programs are run. This is the guidance to the Economic Development Department for reviewing potential agreements and incentive options. Incentive agreements, as the name would suggest, are meant to incentivize or induce behavior. So looking for a company to create something in the market that wouldn't otherwise be there. That is the but-for construct. So but for the incentives being offered, the applicant would not undertake the project or enterprise. And that could be at all. It could be in the specific way that a company is proposing, or it could be that they would, a company would perform the project in a different location. And so we also, the city looks at making sure that we're being competitive in the kind of national landscape, international landscape, to bring benefits to El Paso. Chapter 380 and the adopted city policy are written permissively with flexibility to allow City Council to respond to market trends, specific needs, and priorities for the region. This allows the city to support projects. Our policy is performance-based, not punitive, looking at making sure that that companies are kept in compliance, not that we're disregarding information presented to us, but the goal is to support the successful completion of a project. And so, for example, in the finding we were just discussing about the 6 out of 7 agreements did not have financial information reviewed. Correct, noted. However, all 6 of the agreements called out are either completed or very close to completion on the project. So I think that's important for the public to know that those projects did happen. And then also just noting for those of you council members will know that the department has brought forward certain high priority sectors at council direction. So things like housing, entertainment, quality of place projects. Those have included upfront financing, which is a little bit higher risk. And so City Council has worked on all of those agreements to provide direction and review and to make sure that there are additional backstops and that those changes to the policy, anything that is higher risk that is a little bit different with those upfront grants, that those have been communicated and approved by City Council as part of those adopted 380 agreements. Here's the process. It's a pretty familiar slide that we go through often. So just outlining that from the very beginning of the 380 agreement process, from the time that we intake a potential deal to the review, the application, the negotiations, the review, and handoff to compliance. The compliance team is involved from the beginning, and the department does verify every step that matches the adopted policy. So verifying that information provided by a company on an application matches the approved policy, that the incentive prospect provided meets the approved policy, and the department also assesses all potential incentive agreements, both against policy, so the percentages, the participation, but also looks at comparable deals that have been approved by council to make sure that the city is being kind of competitive within itself, that we're matching what has been approved in the past. So just calling that out on here. As you can see, this is what the Economic Development Department one-pager looks like when we receive it in. So it details all the information collected from a project and reflection of the capital investment, the jobs, metrics, comparison data on similar deals. And then the second page of this typically includes an economic impact analysis, verifying that the potential project provides a net benefit to the city, even post-incentives. And I'll hand it off to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Alejandra Fuentes, Contract Compliance Manager for Economic Development. So this here is the compliance process within economic development. Karina just explained that the contract goes through different processes. This is the last process once it's been executed in front of council. Better? Yes? Okay. All right. So between execution of the agreement and the end of the agreement, once it enters the compliance process, we immediately take the applicant into an orientation so that we can present the expectations up front and also to work on the partnership for the 5, 10, 50 years that the contract will be with us. And then there will be a submittal period where they deliver the package of the grant submittal, and that's where compliance and the team reviews that everything is in place before giving any payments. So really the applicant will not be seeing a payment for about the first to third year of being in contract, because first they have to build, and then they have to submit, and then we review. So to preface, I will be going through what gaps were identified, as well as what processes we have in place and what process improvements we'll create. So in summary, 5 findings were identified by the audits, and to correct and to improve, we have set 17 standard operating procedures, as well as training material, and we have also created a system within Monday.com that helps us streamline and track everything in one place. I'll also go over updated checklists that we have put in place to address these issues, and as well as other controls and the annual review schedule that was established to continue delivering this information. This is just a quick snapshot of one of our agreement checklists. So this is one that we have to make sure that the contract has key components that allows us to verify and keep our companies in compliance. For the first finding, the audit noted that in 2021, there were some policy revisions that were removed from the 2015 policy. I just wanted to note that every agreement and every policy is approved by council. This policy specifically was taken to council in January 19 of 2021 and May 11th, 2021 to address these changes. And these changes were really in place to respond to the market conditions at that time. And as part of the process improvement, we have engaged with Newmark Consulting to rewrite the 380 policy. Sorry, just a second. That is the first finding, but do feel free to ask any questions as I'm going through these.
We have a question, Representative Chavez.
Thank you, Chairman. You said we hired a consultant to update the policy, is that right?
That's correct. That would be the Newmark Consulting firm.
And who's
We
that?
did that about a year ago. We made the commitment to work with both the county and us to come up with a joint policy, and the county didn't move, and so we're going to move forward and get our part done.
Thank you.
Okay, and so who's that? Is that?
So we're moving forward with the city. We'd still like to have the consulting group look at both the Chapter 380 and 381 policies together, as most companies that come in are getting agreements from both entities. Newmark Consulting is a Texas-based group, and the specific lead on this project is Kim Moore, who has worked extensively in municipal governance, so very experienced and knowledgeable about the government side of contracts, but also is a site selector, so helping companies make decisions about where to locate their business. So she knows both sides of that incentive process, provides this as a service, and was one of the choices, again, because of, I think, very specifically her expertise in the Texas framework. Obviously, we're still working on the contract, so I don't have a ton of detail from her yet, but her initial look at this was that there are some tools that we're not taking full advantage of. So part of that contract involves a full review of the policy and the process, including our application materials, so reviewing for kind of benchmarking best practices, general competitiveness, and then places where we might want to set up programs that better fit today's council priorities. So again, things like housing, mid-sized businesses, maybe some flexibility on workforce initiatives, that sort of thing. Right now, the 380 policy is very capital intensive. That's what it's focused on.
So when is that going to be completed, more or less?
We reached out for an update with Kim today. It is still going back and forth between, and I was like, Juan is off the hook, not our legal, so still with county legal and the consultant. But as Ms. Mack pointed out, I think if we don't have an answer very soon, we will take that offline.
And then in terms of the incentives policy, will we have a chance to discuss those prior to it coming back to council, or?
Correct. Part of the Numeric Consulting Agreement involves both meetings and discussions with city staff, folks on implementation, council, but we also ask that it include a stakeholder group, so discuss with companies that either have or have not used incentives in the past about ways to be responsive to that. And then, of course, as with all of our policies, council would be involved in that process, and as noted on the audit report, asked to approve the policy changes.
And my bigger question is, the incentive policy, the last time it was changed was in 2021. We're almost at the end of 2025. So this is probably a policy that will be put in place for a few years. How do we basically come up with a policy that has the vision from this new mayor and council? Because we haven't done our strategic plan yet to make sure that we, align those two things.
Okay.
So when we meet as city council, I think we'll have a conversation and really talk about what we see as key markets. I think the pieces in terms of the policy really help us to understand how we execute what you tell us those key priorities are going to be.
Okay.
So from my understanding, all those kind of need to go together. We'll have a comprehensive economic development strategy that's underway that we're bringing together. This is supposed to be coming at the same time, and so our thought was that all of those would sort of be adopted within the same time frame. We may be a little later than February right now, but the timing was supposed to be together.
Yeah.
Okay, but basically we'll have an opportunity to align both things. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Any other questions before we continue? Okay, seeing none, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so our projects are 55% of them are pre-vetted for financial capacity, meaning that other partners do these checks before they come to us. We also use other sources like SEC, IRS, BLS, and for our publicly traded companies, there's also other avenues where we can review these, such as their public 10Ks. However, the gap in the documentation was identified for this. So in order to correct this and to create a process improvement for this, we coordinated with the Office of the Comptroller and city attorneys to conduct risk analyses when agreements need additional review. And also, we have half of our agreements, if not most, are performance-based, meaning that the financial risk is generally low. Sorry, this was a little frozen. Okay, yes. So the financial risk is low, as these are performance-based, meaning that we will review the compliance first and then pay after, with the exception of a handful of these agreements that are grant-based. For the incentives reporting, which is finding 3, the audit noted that the annual booklet was missing some data and was inconsistent in reporting of job counts. Apologies, there we go. So this report was intended to report on 380 general fund agreements, which means that some of these other some of these other metrics were reported elsewhere, such as Excel and spreadsheets individually within each agreement. But to improve this process and ensure that we close all necessary gaps, moving forward, we are now requesting waiver reports directly from planning and inspections. We have also updated our Chapter 380 checklist to ensure we get all this information out. And we have integrated a special districts map within our Monday.com software to ensure we're also tracking other kinds of metrics and not just 380. Okay, so for the applicant's report, it's important to note that within the company, once they bring those metrics to us, the definition may change depending on the agreement or their own policies. But it's important to note that each company defines full-time definition differently, and different entities do so as well. So for example, the IRS, it's 30 hours a week for a full-time employee, and then the state workforce, typically 32 to 40 hours, while the city of El Paso, the standard hours is 35 hours a week. So within the reporting, the company will bring the contractual metrics to us. Their employee metrics might be higher. However, they don't report on raw numbers. They do report on their contractual obligations.
And then just for clarification and for the benefit of the public, a note to everyone that the state of Texas does require that every single incentive agreement, regardless of type, be uploaded into the state comptroller database. That is publicly available. You can see the entire agreement, the status, the amounts approved at any time, not just from El Paso, but any jurisdiction. So that is all reported as well through the state. And then if you go to the new ElPasoEID.com website, there is an active update. And so as we update the booklet quarterly, that is available for the public. And there is an interactive incentive booklet as well, which we just finalized and is really cool to walk through, that kind of leads you through these agreements and some of the metrics on there.
I had a quick question, and what, I guess, from what we are looking at here, since I've been on council, there's been 2 agreements that have been updated. It was Tenet and ADP.
Yes.
Those were not part of this audit.
Correct.
And so as I'm kind of reading through this, and based on what you have both said, there's typically 32 to 40 hours, there's 35 hours, there's 30 hours, and from my perspective on those 2 agreements, we didn't catch that from the start, where Tenet made sense. It's a hospital, they have weird hours, and we were trying to do like a Monday through Friday 8 to 5 40-hour weekend. That doesn't exist in the hospital system. So is there more that you can share on that to make sure that that's not happening and we're actually customizing these agreements based on the industry that they're in?
So I think you'll see, so something that City Council just approved, right, the agreement with Ferveret. And there was a discussion in there about using like an hours comparable, so hours served and not necessarily a per week definition, to reflect the fact that they were doing internship hours, or that they might have flexibility based on manufacturing capacity. So they might have high periods of work where you're doing more than 40 hours, or weeks where there's less than 30, and we wanted to credit them for that. And I think this is part of why we wanted to bring this up is, we do now include the contractual requirement and the actual reported. What the department is reviewing for and what compliance is looking at is meeting the metrics as approved in the agreement, so that we are meeting the definition that was approved, with council oversight. Generally, that's going to be the 35-hour per week definition for most industries, but there might be specialty definitions. And so what the department is most interested in presenting to the public is what the incentive is sort of quote unquote paying for, right? What is being incentivized on the job side, and making sure that that's clear. But I think that is another thing that in the 380 rewrite, we want to, I think, call out some of those industries where we know that there's flexibility, and where we might need different definitions. But we're just pointing out from here that, workforce IRS, what a company says on their website, we have X number of employees, might look different than what is being reported to us and what is contractually required.
And I guess so, for my understanding, the public's understanding, what is on the screen right now that's new based off of what you've learned from issues like ADP or tenant, or has this already been on the books? I'm trying to understand that part.
So I think I'm confused a
We
little
started
bit.
getting a lot of those questions right at the
Yeah.
tail end of COVID. I mean,
Okay.
a lot of these agreements that we brought back were approved before. And I think as we were going through getting people back on track and at the tail end of COVID, that's when we started having the conversation about the 35-hour week, probably in 23.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we had a few, but those did come back to council, and those were approved by council for those revisions.
Yeah, and the audit
Okay.
finding was specific to the way that we report that number. It was not about the definition being used or discrepancies in that. And as you've noted, it may be different agreement to agreement. It was just making sure that, instead of saying the agreement requires 1,000 employees, actually providing whether they met that or not. Although I think no doubts on this one, because Ali looks at a ton of payroll calculations and that sort of thing. Generally, if companies are not meeting their employment counts, they will be a closed agreement because they'd be out of compliance.
Okay, and that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just don't want to. I understood
I know.
the tenant and the ADP situation, and I just want to make sure something's on the book. So we're really customizing that, because I
Yes.
think that's a lot of time that is wasted going back. And I know there's been
Correct.
leadership change in your department as well, and all of that, but that should just be figured out from the onset, and we should be
Yeah.
asking those questions. So
Yeah, the
that's why I'm
pol-
asking that.
No, you're right. The adopted policy has that definition for quality jobs. Council approved that change to the 35 hours per week, and so that's what we use going forward. If there are modifications, like in the case with tenant, with Ferveret, those are communicated, specifically called out, and we ask for council approval of that modified definition.
Okay, and the last thing I had on this specific finding, number 3, as I was reading through the audit, it was one of the more significant findings, in my opinion.
Right.
And what I'm not seeing on these slides, maybe you're going to explain it, because I know there's 2 more slides on finding 3, but I didn't see it on those slides, is that the finding said that there was a discrepancy of $1.2 million for TERS fee waivers, and that's not really addressed on this slide, so I wanted to understand a little bit more.
So I think we'll go back. So I think the one thing to note is not reported to council as part of the 380 incentive booklet specifically. Tax increment reinvestment zones are subject to annual reporting requirements with the Texas Comptroller, in addition to being presented as part of the annual budget with City Council. And so the finding, what we did is we just integrated all of our different places that we reported. So TERS agreements were reported through a different booklet and report. And then the waivers were being tracked as sort of right, when City Council sees the agreements, right, we say a fee waiver up to $5,000, $10,000. So we were putting a flat amount. We were not tracking kind of where they were in the actual fees waived. And so those are 2 things that we have added those into the booklet for, again, the dissolution of any doubt that all of those are listed in there. But they were being tracked and reported in other places, but the goal was to kind of put that all in one place because they are all incentive provided.
So it wasn't that $1.2 million was missing. It was that it was
Correct.
being tracked in
Yes.
different places.
Yes.
And now, based on the finding, you have put it together in a better system, so all of it can be tracked and easily accessible at
Yes.
times when you need it.
Yeah, and like Ali pointed out, historically, the purpose of the compliance booklet for the 380s was to reflect general fund obligations. And so when we have agreements that have multiple funding sources or different funding sources or specialty funding reports, those were not historically included because the goal was to kind of see what the tax rebate obligations were. But to make it all clear, we've put that all in there across the different fund types.
Okay. I'll stop there, and I'm going to go over to Representative Chavez.
Thank you, Chairman. And I wasn't sure if we were going to ask questions like in the middle of the
Go ahead.
presentation, but now that he's asking on finding 3, I'll just jump in at this time. Yes, so, and maybe this will be easier to answer questions as we go. So, okay, so the incentives are performance-based, and I'm looking at finding 3 from the report and the sample that was given by the audit. The auditors.
Correct.
So the actual number of jobs created and or retained are not being reported.
They're not
Are in-
included in that booklet.
Okay, are incentives based on the number of full-time employees and part-time, or just full-time employees?
Full-time, with the, I think really again, except for the fervid agreement, which was just recently approved, would not have been included in this audit. It's a full-time employee definition or full-time equivalent.
Okay, because the slide says applicants report employee counts based on the agreement definition of full-time employees. So
Correct.
where again are they reporting that? Because it wasn't demonstrated in the sample that they selected. So where are they?
So I think it's two different things, not being reported to city council through that compliance report, and I think Liz can correct me if I've got this wrong, but there was not a concern or a finding on us not verifying the job counts for the agreement compliance, correct? No, come up here. It has to do with our annual reporting.
Yes, that's correct. It's in the annual reporting, so they just list the contractual and not the actual.
Yes.
So do we go back and list the actual?
Yes, so we have now reconciled that because as Ali and I have both mentioned, every agreement is actually reviewed for performance. So we had the actual counts for whether they were meeting the metric or not on the company side. And so we've just incorporated that into the report so that there's not any confusion about whether a company is meeting their metrics or not.
Okay. And what other performance-based measures do you use aside from
It's
this?
going to depend on the specific terms of the agreement, but generally you're going to be talking about things like meeting construction deadlines. It'll be your wages, benefits, right, to percentage, your total investment, and we look very specifically at where you're spending that money. And it has to be on hard costs, not soft costs, so we don't cover things like design and engineering. And then it'll depend on other things. So if there were requirements that they, hire from a certain area, that might be something that we're checking against. But those kind of four are usually our big ones.
Okay. Could you kind of help us understand, Karina, how your department is divided? Because it's almost like you're doing a mini audit to your
Correct.
380 agreement.
Yes.
So how do you divide and do all of this work, in
I
terms
think that's
of
great.
recruiting companies and then coming up with the agreements and then following up on those agreements and then communicating with these companies through that process and even after the agreements are signed? Could you just kind of walk us through that?
Sure.
So we can better
And I think
understand.
what's helpful is a reminder that we're one of the project-based, the program-based budgeting pilots, and so that's how our programs are also structured in our budget and in our KPIs. So in the kind of admin category, we are one of the departments in economic development that has an in-house compliance team. So while we also work, of course, closely with Office of the Comptroller, Office of Management and Budget, and City Attorney's Office, we do have compliance in-house. And so the way that this is structured is you have admin, finance, and compliance, and then we have our industry development team, which includes redevelopment, international affairs, that sort of thing, and then small business focus. Everybody's pretty collaborative. A lot of these have overlap in the way that the programs are done, but in terms of I think our most traditional Chapter 380 agreement, the master incentive agreements that were part of this audit, that was the focus, that would be the industry development division headed by Bill Allen. And so that's the checking for the policy, those one-pagers when we're talking about the comps, bringing those forward, and then working very closely with the in-house compliance team and city attorneys throughout that process so that we're understanding policy compliance, using our templated agreements, our templated language, the checklists that we have to make sure that everything is in line before it is ever posted to a council agenda for approval.
And I thank you for that information. The reason why I bring it up is because, like Representative Nino mentioned, this audit was, I think, when you were just an interim director at the time. Is that correct? Right. And now you're the director. Is that correct? So
Correct.
things have changed since then, which is why I think it's important to have this conversation. A lot of people have, brought up to me in conversations with them in the community that, the incentive program is basically a giveaway. And so it's important that it's transparent, but it's also important that we're clear on just all of the process that we're going through to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible with taxpayer money.
Correct.
At the end of the day. And so that's why I just think it's important to just have information out there for the public to know about, to make sure that we are being very diligent in the process and that we're not just giving away things out of preference or, whatever other reason someone could think of. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the reasons why we just want to highlight for this, because we talked about not having performance on a few of the audits and not getting a recapture. It's really important to know that you've already performed before we give you a payment. So, if that's the case, if somebody goes out of business and you don't complete the 20 years, it doesn't mean that we've given you an incentive for a portion of work that wasn't delivered, to our community. And so I think that's why we keep, highlighting that piece. And so I think I get the same thing, like you've given them all these millions of dollars and what do we get? And so in some cases we have folks who are, not even meeting those metrics and they're not getting payouts. They may have an active agreement, but until you meet the metrics, you're not going to get the payment. And so I think we want to just make sure we continue to say that to folks as well. Thank you.
And before I go to Representative Nino, just based on what Representative Chavez just said, Karina, when were you named interim?
It would have been December of 2023, right before Christmas. It was very fun.
Okay, and then you were named director
January of this year.
of this year. Okay. And Liz, sorry, your microphone doesn't work. This audit took place between what month in 23 and what month in 24?
So it was the audit was completed April 2024. I believe we engaged it June 2023.
June 2023. Okay, so there was a prior director there, and then Karina became interim 5 months into the audit, and then you finished it 4 months into her being interim, and then she became the director permanently at the beginning of this year. Just so we have that timeline. I'm going to go to Representative Nino.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Karina, and to your team as well. One question for you. I'm trying to get some clarity as well, because I know that we're in conversation of visiting the policy changes. How old is our oldest 380 agreement?
Oh.
Do we know?
2008. See, she knows off the top of her head. 2008.
So whenever a policy change comes forward, like 2015, 2021, and now essentially in the next year or so, how do we do comparisons of what the policy that was in place at the time that incentive took place versus any policy updates that have taken place?
Yeah. So the date that a prospect comes in, right, up until the point at which an agreement is approved by City Council, they would be subject to whatever policy is in place at the time of approval. The agreements itself details all of the metrics. That is our governing document. So if for example, the job metric, right, is different because the policy in place at the time asked for this definition, that is the definition that's placed in that agreement. That is what we are still holding them to. So they're subject to the terms at the time that they signed it. There have been situations where we've brought forward amendments for City Council based on the fact that, we're midway through an agreement, we have changed our policy, we acknowledge that it's not in line with industry terms, and so we'd recommend kind of bringing that up to date. But so for that agreement in 2008, still subject to all the terms that they originally agreed to.
Perfect. Okay, no, that makes perfect sense, and I think overall that's important to highlight, because if we start having conversations of any policy changes, some of these agreements that many of us didn't even take part of conversations might not be changed and whatnot, right?
Correct, yeah. Generally wouldn't have any sort of retroactive effect.
How many current 380 agreements do we have? Do you happen to know?
83.
83, okay, perfect. And I think this could be a question to the audit department. Is there a way that, I know that this audit is essentially already complete, but can it be beneficial to include at the end of the audit that we are essentially looking into scheduling a follow-up audit so that the individual or anyone in the public could understand that we are working, kind of what Mayor Pro Tem was mentioning about the policy changes that are coming forward? I don't know if that's something that we could do or look into, just again, so that individuals know that we're taking action and being proactive on even further being transparent.
I think we could have that discussion at the end of the item.
Okay.
I think everybody's having some thoughts, and it's a healthy discussion. I'm not trying to say, but we'll have that discussion when they finish their presentation, because I think we are kind of on the same page, but we don't know what we want to do. So let's have that after.
Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. We'll kick over to, I think we just wanted to show you some of the dashboards we have set up and then go to number 4. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so just real quickly, this is the dashboard that we look at on Monday.com. This is the process that we've already implemented. We've been working with Monday.com, transferring all of our data from spreadsheets to a centralized database for the last year and a half. And so as you can see, the TEZ and waivers are being tracked, as well as contractual and actual jobs. This is the incentive agreement booklet. It's the automated version that we had just talked about, and this will also be available publicly on our website for quarterly updates. Moving on to finding 4, the audit noted that there was inconsistent tracking of deadlines and extensions, as well as some of the payments. So it's important to note that ever since then, again, we've transitioned over to Monday.com to close some of these gaps and make sure that we have all of our agreements centralized and tracked within Monday.com. We've automated these notices. This is what our Monday.com dashboard looks like, and this is an example of the agreements that we have, as well as different kinds of dates that we track, from the dates they need to submit construction permits to certificates of occupancy. And on the bottom right corner, that is an example of what the company will receive as part of their reminder to let them know that within 30 days their package is due to the city. And the city staff also gets a notification of that, so that both the applicant and the department can track these dates more accurately. Lastly, for finding 5, the audit found that the Chapter 380 agreements lacked recapture clauses. It's important to note that the Chapter 380 code does not require a recapture agreement. That is often confused with our Chapter 312 abatement agreements that do require that language. And any changes to the recapture language is approved by council, and as well as all of our modified clauses within the new policies have been adopted by council. Also, I wanted to point out that even though an agreement sometimes might not perform at 100% and we might have to terminate some of these agreements and go back and recapture, it does not mean that the business failed. Some companies that we've terminated in the past, we still keep our partnerships with them, and such as SDI Technologies, Fred Loya Insurance. They were unable to meet the metrics. However, they still contribute by creating quality jobs, contributing to the tax base, and overall promoting the quality of the city of El Paso jobs and industry. So the purpose of these chapter agreements is not to be punitive, but really the goal is to support growth, create these quality jobs, and make El Paso a more economically competitive city. With that, we'd like to finalize and open up for more questions.
Okay, let's go to questions. Now that we've been at the end of the presentation, I have Rep. Bandonel Rocha first.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you for the presentation on the updates and what you all have done to correct or follow the recommendations, right, that the audit discovered. First, I want to just for statements say that when you make these 380 agreements, they are automatically, when they start business, putting into the tax base, just not the city tax base. So I want to make sure that that's clarified.
Yes, or to a percentage, right?
Thank you.
So even in cases where the city's adopted 380 policy is a 100% rebate of the city's tax collection,
Right.
you are still seeing things like jobs. Those are people spending back into the local economy. That's sales tax. But also, we often do a percentage base. So it might be 80% or 75% or 50 of business personal. And so there is still some percentage of direct benefit and indirect. And you all know this. Every single time that the department presents a potential incentive package, we include both the incentive proposed and a tax benefit slide. So we talk about the indirect and direct benefits of that company coming into the region. And I think very important to note that while the city is often joined by the county in these incentive proposals, things like the school districts, EPCC, the hospital district, cannot participate in incentive deals, and so 100% of that tax benefit goes to those regional entities already. Absolutely.
Thank you, Karina,
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate the expansion of that, because I think there's a misconception. I know I heard a lot of it when I was on the campaign trail last year, and 380 agreements came up in every single forum that I participated in. And so I think it's really important to understand the benefits that they provide while also trying to get a company to invest within the community. The second thing that I want to say is that the recapture has always been, it was almost weaponized, I think, for a long time. And the fact that you can show that that's already, and it has been included in the policy, and how it is adopted, and really how you manage it, that's always been part of the policy, I think sets the record straight across the board for the misinformation that may have been out there saying that it wasn't included in there before. So thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you all for the chance.
Representative Chavez.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't realize I was next. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to go back to finding 1, Karina.
Oh.
And I know I jumped in at finding 3, but
Fine.
again, I didn't realize we were going to be asking questions in the middle. So if we could just go back to finding 1. How the criteria was set up in the past, where it included financial stability and capacity to complete projects, and now it's really just based upon request. If you could just go through the process of how you decide who you request it from, and what kind of risk assessment do you go through? Like, what is your process? Is it just like intuitively, or do you have some
Right.
specific way of going about this?
And I think this is a case where one of the things we'd like to do as the department level is really formalize that a bit more. As you all have seen over this past year, right, we have started doing some more upfront grants. Council has been talking about investments in things like childcare credits, housing. Those are going to be industries where they need hefty incentives. We need to do market correction to achieve those goals. And so part of that is the risk appetite of City Council in terms of what we're looking at. So the part of what the department would like to do, working with OTC and City Attorney's Office, right now, about half the deals come in pre-vetted. If they are a public company, we will check their public records. So again, your SEC filings, IRS reports, also look at if they are existing and they are expanding, what are they doing with the BLS or with, other areas that they might already be located. Part of that is also looking at the Secretary of State filings, Texas comptrollers. We coordinate with the tax office. So one of the requirements when you apply for an incentive is that you do not owe the city taxes. And so that's a good indicator. Something else, and this is sort of where it's a balance between the art and the science, is have they successfully completed projects before, either in El Paso or in other jurisdictions, and have those projects been of a similar scale. And so unsuccessful completion of projects, or places where maybe they've signed several incentive agreements in other states and haven't quite completed anything, that would indicate to us a higher risk on the department side. And so that's something where we might dive in a little bit more into the information. I will also note that every single application, right, the company is providing their anticipated project description, their investment numbers, their jobs numbers. Typically, we are also asking for a pro forma, which is a financial statement. It is showing the projections of estimated expenses and revenue for the project. That is a way to assess financial capacity, is if the project is anticipated to generate revenue, if it looks like it's going to be able to be completed successfully. Part of the thing that you're always going to run into with economic development deals is that but-for clause. If you are looking at financial capacity, most of the time there will be a gap that needs to be filled. That is that but-for, is without the incentive, the project would not be able to be completed. And so there's always kind of a little bit of an inherent level of risk there, which is why we prefer performance-based incentives, and that is what City Council has authorized. But that is one of the things. So we're not 100%, I would say we're not 100% at addressing this finding, but it is something we'd like to make it very, very clear for everyone what the risk matrix is. Bring council into that conversation about where we would where the city feels comfortable taking on that relative risk, and then map out that process very clearly for applicants about when we're going to collect that information, what type of information they might be expected to provide. Because the other thing we don't want to run into is if a company is vetting El Paso as a prospect, very, very early on, and they're not going to pull the trigger for another 2-3 years, we don't want to be asking for extensive financial filings that might be out of date or irrelevant, or turn away a good prospect because it's so much information up front to disclose publicly without any sort of information about whether this is the right fit for them.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
information. And that's something that, I would like to
Yeah, of
prioritize
course.
specifically, just because, everybody has a certain risk tolerance level, but we also want to make sure that we're, again, fiscally responsible, and that we're doing, the best type of process in order to be transparent. I think, maybe having this process be more objective and less subjective
Yeah.
would be helpful as well, because I also think that there could be a misconception possibly that we're not being fair, or
Correct.
and so
Yeah.
I just think that the more tools we have in place to ensure that we are being as objective as possible, and that we are going through a process in order to determine how
I would
much
agree.
risk we are taking on as a city also
Yeah.
is important. Although economic development is crucial for the future of our city and our economy and everything else that we've already discussed. So I would like to see that come forward.
Absolutely.
Hopefully soon. I also want to talk about this council review of policy. So when was the last time the whole process was brought forth to council? I know today we're talking about it because of the audit, but according to the policy, it used to be a biannual basis, and now it's periodic.
Mhm.
So when was the last time that was done?
So 2021 was the last time City Council adopted a new Chapter 380 incentive policy. That would have been the last time that formal changes were made to the language. I will also note that I believe some of the modification in that biennial language reflects this change in the state statute. The state also used to require a
Okay.
2-year review process. It's good practice. As you've noted, we're coming up on 5 years in that gap, and while we'd like this to be something that comes forward more often, in a way that also doesn't impact deals in the queue, right? We don't want to hold up prospective incentive agreements or companies that are looking to come here because we're in the middle of a policy change consistently. And so I think some of the things we're hoping to get out of the consultant agreement and that rewrite is, one, that transparency on how we're making those decisions, what we're prioritizing, but also allowing some of that flexibility, still in a clear way for the public, to address shifts and changes in policy and initiatives. I think this one was adopted right at the kind of tail end of COVID, and we're still kind of seeing what the effects of that are in various industries.
Okay, and then reporting to council. That
Mhm.
also changed according to the guidelines. So it used to be an annual report, and now it's periodically. What does that mean, or what has it meant for you? Haven't been here except since January. So
I'm also
when is the
gonna be kinda
next?
guessing about. You were here.
Yeah, right now you're getting the updates now in executive session for the quarterly piece. I believe we used to do one annual report to City Council on the status of everything, maybe back in, Liz, 17, 18?
Sorry, I missed the question.
The last time we did the annual, you were talking about the annual report that you used to use for audits. Was that in 17, the last time you saw that?
So the last time was when Jessica was still here.
Yeah, it would have been 2018.
Yeah.
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 But I think we have to figure out, based on the information that we're now providing publicly, what the gap is between that quarterly report
Yes.
and what council might want to see.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Mhm.
Again, 380 agreements is a topic, like Representative Maldonado Rocha just said, that our community asks us about regularly.
Yeah.
So I think having an annual report, and then it could also be something that we communicate to the community. We will
Yes.
be having this annual report coming up this month, so that it's just a more transparent process,
Mhm.
so that, again, our community doesn't feel like we're trying to hide something from them, or that we're trying to, again, do any type of giveaways. It's an investment in our community for our future. So I think we just need to make sure that we control the narrative by having open presentations and open dialogue and
Absolutely.
building that trust.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Ms. Mack has asked us to do as part of kind of the budget previews every year, is talk about, again, a lot of the metrics in the compliance side on the 380s are also tied to the program-based budgeting. And when we do those department previews, bringing in, I think, some of these reporting along with that. And then just, again, for the public, for you all, at any time, the most up-to-date report on the compliance metrics for 380s would be either through the Texas Comptroller dashboard, or it is available on our website so that people don't have to wait until a January, February presentation to know what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you, Karina.
If I may, Chair. Robert reminded me I have not brought to this meeting. Is she here? She's not. So Ms. Yvette Griffin is our new risk manager, director of risk. She is going to be doing an enterprise-wide risk assessment, really helping us to think through some of these. She will touch most departments. So I certainly will have her come before FOAC as we're going through some of that work and really talk about what we're seeing. She's already starting to set up meetings with every department to talk about what it is we should be working on, starting to pull some of those plans together. I see her working very closely with internal audit once that position is filled.
Yeah, I failed to mention her, but yes, she is also helping us with that risk assessment. Yvette is fantastic.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a few things, specifically, Liz, on finding 3 and that discrepancy of, I think, $1.2 million that I was mentioning earlier. What was the thought behind that from the internal audit's perspective on that? And does what the management response on that make sense to you, and how that there's no real discrepancy on there? It was just kind of all over the place. Now it's going to be in one place.
So when we conduct these audits, we look to see what is being reported to City Council, and then that booklet was the one that was being distributed to council members. So we always confirm what is being reported is the actual numbers. Given that the waivers were in a separate database, we would just like them included in whatever report is being reported to City Council. That way they get the whole picture as far as all the incentives paid out, all the waivers issued. That way they don't have to be looking for the different incentives in different places.
I think adding more of that disclaimer can bring more clarity to that part, just because it is a huge amount of money, and now that we've discussed it, I fully understand it now. But it really was glaring when I saw that. But if you added what you just said in writing, that would be helpful. Ms. Mack, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I don't want to impede on the audit process and what they do, but it feels like we're kind of rolling forward with backup audits. Like, so we started in 15 and we do a follow-up to 17, but a lot of things changed, the way that we report things, where the information is changes. And so I think the team has done a great job of trying to ensure that we are making those matches, and I would hope that we just look at where the data is, rather than saying, our last audit, it was done in this way and reported in this way. As long as it's transparent and available and all the parts are there in terms of the pieces that they should be looking for, that they get credit for that, rather than continuing to report back to reports that have been done almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of also what I'm saying in terms of the clarity that is needed. There's a little bit more context needed, where I asked you earlier, why did you do 2015 versus 2021? And if there was more of that context throughout, I think it would make it a little bit more clear on why things happen the way they happen. What I will also say on the other side, though, on management response throughout this particular audit, I thought it was a little vague.
Yeah.
And it wasn't...
There was some tension. I'm going to be honest. There was some tension in terms of being able to feel that the team could provide the information that they wanted. And it was a bit of back and forth, and a lot was happening during that time frame. And that was one of the reasons why we did the separate presentation.
Okay.
I think we're much better now. I think, as you've seen, I think that staff are able to write as much as they want, and make the case and ensure that as you're adopting, any type of report, that it's a complete report.
I appreciate that transparency and that accountability, and really, really do. And I think there's been a lot of information here. The one thing that I understand that there might have been some tension or something, but then when we have these audits and people are just reading the audits, we need to make sure that we're not getting that tension into the final product, because I look at finding number 5 in the management response is, well, the Texas chapter doesn't require recapture. And me as a member of the public would be like, well, if it doesn't require it, why not just add it and be more transparent in that sense, right? So I think that's the other side of the coin when we're not being more inclusive of information that makes it a little bit more clear on both ends. And Liz, just on the recapture part, what was the thought behind that recapture? You know, was it trying to add an extra layer of transparency? It's not required by law, but I think this would be a good idea. Or what was that thought from the internal audit department?
So with this one, it's not based on the requirements by law. We cite the policy, which states that agreement shall contain recapture clauses in the event that such conditions are not met. So that we just base it on whatever the policy was at the time.
Is that 2015 or 2021?
It's actually been in place since it was in the 2010, 2015, and 2021 policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And see, I think that is really important to say there, and just be very clear. 2010, 15, 21. It's been in policy for a good while.
Yes. Yeah, and just noting that the 380 policy does require recapture clauses, but it also provides that council can modify those. And so that was the note that we made on that, which is just in the cases where recapture has been removed or modified, that has been with the full knowledge and approval of City Council.
Okay, and so that has happened through council action. That's what you meant and what you
Yes.
wrote there. And that was the other question that I had, so appreciate the clarity there. But I think when we're thinking audit reports just on all sides, the information is so important for it to be in writing and be very specific. I see audit reports being a way of really looking at something, and you're not left with more questions than answers, whether it's on the management side or on the internal audit side. And I think, as I've said many different times before, and I'm not trying to get on that soapbox of corrective action plan would be well suited for another occasion like this one, where there's not necessarily that follow-up audit that is needed, but a corrective action plan would really demonstrate in a document this is everything that they've done, rather than you coming in as management and saying here's a presentation on a lot of what we've implemented. Because I think there was a lot of good and significance in this report, but then the clarity was kind of missing there. So I think that just so I could throw this out there before I go to Rep. Chavez, we need to think about what we're going to do here. Are we going to move this audit forward? Are we going to hold it back? Or are we going to say, okay, let's move it forward, but now, because we have the follow-up audit process in place that I don't particularly like I've said, I like the corrective action plan that other internal audit departments have done just across the country. Do we do that follow-up audit? And as we're thinking about that in the audit plan, just throwing that out as a question to think about as we decide on what we're doing. And I'll go to Representative Chavez.
Thank you, Chairman. And that's exactly what I was going to ask Liz. When is the follow-up audit going to take place?
So if you approve the action to go ahead and accept the audit and do a follow-up audit, we will schedule it for FY26. We will follow up with Karina just to make sure that she is ready for us to go in and do the follow-up audit.
Okay. Well, I'd like to make, Chairman, a motion to approve this audit today. I think transparency is really important in our community, especially when it comes to 380 agreements and just financial things in general. So I would like to make a motion to approve this audit. And I want to thank Karina and her team for the presentation and for all of the information that helped us understand this audit that actually took place before our time here on FOAC. But we appreciate it. Thank you.
Could I interject? Sorry, Juan Gonzalez, the City Attorney's Office. Could I interject just quickly and just make a minor recommendation that maybe perhaps that we include the audit, but also the management's response and the presentation as part of the whole audit that's being accepted, because I think then it addresses a lot of the concerns that the FOAC brought up, and then the totality of the record is the audit and presentation that the Internal Audit Office presented and prepared, and then also management's post-audit responses, and more importantly, the remedial and progressive-looking changes that they've made as well.
Do you mean to accept the audit with the new information that was
additional
presented today?
Yes. So it would be and include management's responses and the presentation that was presented during this item.
Yeah.
And
I
feedback
didn't-
from FOAC. Can we add that? Just
And-
because I think we've all said some stuff on that feedback to just kind of strengthen the audit. Like I was giving you a lot of add this for clarity, add this for context. You know what I'm saying, so add that so we could have a better finished product, if that's okay.
Yes, that's,
Second.
thank you.
Can we just revisit that motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to accept the audit as presented, and in addition to that, include the backup information provided by the city and the information that was given vocally at the meeting today at FOAC.
Okay, there's a motion and the second, Nino? Just, okay. So there's a motion and a second. We'll continue discussion if there is any discussion on this. No? Rep Nino?
I think the backup kind of justifies what I was trying to say earlier in regards of just ensuring that us accepting this audit, there's going to be further conversations of us being fiscally responsible in any decisions we make. To include, I think the biggest issue that I was having was with the implementation date, because I stated January 1st, 2025. So in the follow-up audit, in the conversations, the dates might not be aligned just because they say that the implementation was by January 1st, 2025. So I want to ensure that that's also included in the conversation where we're moving forward and being transparent on that as well.
Yeah, you got that, Liz, right? And I think that the follow-up audit will kind of show us those timelines of this is what they did. Maybe they did it on December 31st or something, right? But I think that works. Is there any other discussion on this? Any amendment to the amendment of the amendment? I'm kidding. Okay. Let's move to a vote on this. Motion and a second on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, this passes unanimously 4-0, and we could move this to the City Council for consideration. Thank you for getting us through this item. I know it was a long time coming, but I think this was a very healthy discussion, and I think we all did this with transparency and accountability in mind, so I appreciate it. Let's go to the last item on the agenda, the discussion and action on fiscal year 2025-2026 annual internal audit plan. I'll give it over to you, Miguel.
Good afternoon again. Miguel Montiel with Internal Audit for the record. So we'll be discussing the 2025-2026 annual audit plan. So let's begin with what is an audit plan? We put a small definition here. An audit plan is a risk-based strategic document developed by the chief internal auditor to determine the priorities of the internal audit function, ensuring alignment with the organization's objectives and risk profile. It's a dynamic, forward-looking plan that guides the internal audit activity in delivering assurance and advisory services that are most relevant to the organization's needs. The audit plan is a living document that is flexible and can be updated as needed throughout the fiscal year, as we've done before, with approval of FOAC to remain aligned with the city's most critical and current risks. Talk about a little bit about the risk assessment process. The audits included in the fiscal year 26 audit plan were primarily identified through our risk assessment process. The process included interviews with key city stakeholders to include FOAC members, the city manager, city attorney, the deputy city managers, deputy CFO, and a sample of department heads. And of course, we use our internal audit department staff's knowledge of city operations. The audit plan includes audits related to evaluation of internal controls, assessment of compliance with city policies, contracts, regulations, review of economic and efficient use of city resources, and of course, follow-ups of prior audit recommendations. So general audit objectives are included in the audit plan. Specific audit objectives are determined at the beginning of each audit, of each engagement. So what we do at the beginning of each audit, we take what the overall objectives are for that audit, and we do an engagement, what we call an engagement level risk assessment. So we do another risk assessment to identify the specific audit objectives, take into account any potentially significant risks to the objectives of the area under review. The auditor performs research, we do interviews, we do sometimes what we call pre-planning meetings. So before we even begin, we have meetings with the department. And we issue out a questionnaire or questionnaires to become more familiar with the area under review. Okay. So we're going to talk about a little bit about our audit hours. I know we discussed this, I think the previous meeting, FOIC meeting. So here, for the year, we calculated 18,270 hours are available for the year. This is taking into account 8 staff members, 8.75 staff members. The 0.75 comes in from the chief internal auditor position, which we don't think will be filled probably until the second quarter of the fiscal year. So since they're not going to be here the first quarter, we give them 0.75. Right now we have 8 staff members. So the way it works, we kind of work our way up from the 18 to 70. So if you multiply the 8.75 full-time staff members times 2,088 hours that are available for the year, you get the 18 to 70. From that, we subtract any training and CPE hours. For training and CPE hours, we allocate 50 hours per staff member, and that's to satisfy their 40 hours of CPE credits that we need every year for certified staff, and then 10 extra hours for any city mandatory trainings that we need to participate in. Holidays, there's 96 hours of holidays for the year, so that's to include the birthday holiday that we get, so it's 96 hours times 8.75 equals 840. Of course, vacation and sick leave, those vacations and sick leave accrual depends on the number of how many years an auditor has been here. So if an auditor has been here from 0 to 5 years, you get 96 hours of vacation. If you've been here between 5 and 14 years, you get 136 hours of vacation. If an auditor has been here 15 plus years, you get 160 hours of vacation. So we take those hours into account. That's how we get the 1637. And then general administration, of course, we need some time for admin work, to just manage the office. So we designate 375 hours for this chief internal auditor position, 350 hours for both the deputy city manager, the deputy chief internal auditor, and the audit manager, myself. And each staff member gets 250 hours of admin time per year. So that brings up to a total of 12,780 actual audit hours available. Okay, so we've worked that one a little bit backwards. And then here, we're going to talk about the audit hours that we estimate for full audits. There are about 500 hours. Any follow-up audits, we estimate anywhere between 100 and 250 hours, just depending on the number of findings we need to follow up on. We have recurring audits and projects, and those hours vary by engagement, and we'll show you that a little bit later. And of course, we have carry forwards, and those hours vary by engagement depending how much time we need to complete those carry forwards. We did some benchmarking on the audit plans, and we saw that the city of San Antonio and their approved audit plan for fiscal year 25, they estimate anywhere between 90 hours and 1,200 hours per audit. Most of their audits are over 500 hours. For the city of Houston, the fiscal year 25 annual audit plan for them, they average about 1,000 hours per audit. City of Dallas, fiscal year 25 approved audit work plan for them. They average anywhere between 200 and 1,000 hours per audit. Ours average about 500 or so. Okay. I'll talk about audit resource allocation. So we prioritize our limited resources and emphasize audits with high or moderate risk profile ratings, and you'll see that a little bit later. The specific risk factors related to internal controls, estimated liability and levels of exposure that are used to identify and prioritize risks. As such, the audit function serves as a risk evaluation resource. The number of audits or projects included in the audit plan are based in consideration on number of internal audit staff, staff experience, average hours estimated per engagement. If we need to use any external consultants or experts, and then the unplanned requests from FOAC members and our city management throughout the fiscal year. And this is where we leave those contingency hours, in case any unplanned requests come in during the year. So the next slide, we'll talk about the first quarter, and these are the audits that we scheduled for the first quarter. As you can see in yellow, we have the carry forward audits, and we discussed that in the previous agenda item. So we have the vehicle allowance and take-home cars project. That one, we just need to go to council on, I believe, October 12th. So we just allocated 15 hours for that. The cyber audits we discussed earlier, we're estimating about 50 hours to complete that audit. The Paso Zoo, the financial activity audit, 100 hours. The Red Book assessment, that's an internal assessment we do of our office. This is based on the global internal audit standards. This is to make sure that we're ready for our peer review. So we need 250 hours on that to self-assess ourselves. Animal services construction audit, we still need 400 hours as of September 1st. The audit, the budgeted hours for that audit is 500. So we had just started that audit till the tail end of August. So as of September 1st, we still need, we're still estimated by 400 hours. As of today, we're, maybe 3/4 of the way done through that audit. So it's, we've gone through several of those hours already. Code Enforcement Division, that audit, we started also at the tail end of August, the month of August. The budgeted hours are 500. We estimated we need 400 to complete, and that one, we're probably about, halfway done, third way done, so we're still, towards the beginning portions of that audit. And then we have 2 follow-up audits scheduled. One is the accounts receivable program, a second follow-up audit that we already started, and then planning and inspections permit review audit. We have some recurring audits, and we'll discuss that in a subsequent slide. Here, second quarter, this is, we still have a carry forward, that single family owner occupied renovation program audit. So we scheduled that to begin in the second quarter. This is to remove or to stay away from any conflicts of interest that we have with our previous chief internal auditor. So by that time, there should be no conflict with that audit, so we'll tackle that on in the second quarter. New audits, El Paso Police Department overtime audit, P card and travel review audit from us. This is for a city department, so we'll select the city department and do a P card and travel review. As we were just discussing this previous agenda item, the 380 monitoring audit, we're scheduling a follow-up for that one. Of course, that was pending your decision, so I believe we're going to go forward with that. So we placed it there for a placeholder, so good thing it worked out. And then on-call services agreement audit, we'll schedule a follow-up for that one in the second quarter. Okay. The third quarter, these are the audits that we scheduled for third quarter. The accounts payable audit from the city department. So we'll select the city department and do accounts payable, look at how they pay, how they invoice, how they approve payments in PeopleSoft, make sure they have supporting documentation. Streets and maintenance, we'll do a facility audit. We'll do the city council and city manager's office P card and trial review. We'll be doing a co-sourcing, so we'll be just administering the contract or the co-op agreement that we may gonna enter into. So we have a third party do that audit for us. Peer review, we go through a peer review every 3 years based on our audit standards that we follow. There's 2 sets of audit standards. We follow the internal, the global audit standards from the Institute of Internal Auditors. Those require us to be peer reviewed every 5 years, and we get peer reviewed by other city auditors from across the country. There's usually a team of 3-4 auditors, city auditors that come in and they audit us against the auditing standards. We also follow the government auditing standards. Those require us to be peer reviewed every 3 years. So we go by the more stringent standards. So we get peer reviewed every 3 years. So we're up on our 3 years, so we scheduled a peer review for in the third quarter. We scheduled a follow-up audit of the Parks and Recreation Department, the park usage permit audit, and then a follow-up audit of the accounts payable over at the Paso International Airport. Fourth quarter, you have these 4 new audits here. We'll do a construction audit over at the airport. We're going to do a sports field audit at Parks and Recreation. We're going to look at, do an audit of La Nubes, the Children's Museum contract audit. We'll do an audit of the contract, make sure, the city's getting what we're, the deliverables, make sure we're getting what we're supposed to get and they're getting what they're supposed to get. And then we schedule another P card and travel review audit of another city department. That's for the fourth quarter. So every quarter we have continuous engagement that we do. So every quarter we do something related to the sales tax analysis. This is called the Clearview program. We allocated 40 hours for that. Then we talked about the franchise fee audits with Paso Water, so we scheduled 50 hours for the administration of that. We do something that we just started actually this past week, sales tax discovery. We do the administration on that project. So on this one is we have a contractor that scours, I guess, new businesses here in the city, and they make sure that they're remitting sales taxes to the state. So they do that work for us. So they just started this week. And of course, we administer the employee hotline. We do the hotel occupancy tax audits. We administer that audit. We do conduct tax office refunds every week. The cyber audits will be beginning in the second quarter. The cyber audit over at the health department, so we'll be doing the administering that contract for our vendors, so they can come in and look at our health department. We estimate between 100 to 200 hours. The 200 hours comes from the initial setup, and then any subsequent quarters will be 100 hours budgeted for that work. And then we estimate the Financial Oversight and Audit Committee, the time it takes for us to prepare for these meetings and come here to council to FOIC meetings. So we estimate about 500 hours every quarter for that. Do you have any?
Every quarter or every year?
Every quarter. It's taking a lot of time to prepare for FOIC, for all the reporting out. We keep track of our time, like I mentioned before, and we did an estimate for the last 3 quarters of this past fiscal year, and we've been averaging 400 or 500 hours in preparation for FOIC meetings. Do you have any questions?
Oh, sorry, I was writing some notes down, but we'll go over to Representative Chavez.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that presentation. I wanted to ask if the audits that you have listed here are all high risk.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, they went through a risk assessment process. Of course, we interviewed yourselves and city management and different stakeholders, and then we went through our process of ranking them, and these are the ones that float up to the top. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there any that are listed here that are going to be the first timers that you've never done before?
First timers, I don't think we've done a construction audit at the airport. I don't remember. Have we done a lot of audits at the airport of the concessionaires, of the golf course, of the car rental agencies, of the fixed-based operators with the smaller planes land, but not of construction? La Nube, that's
La
new
Nube.
for us. I mean, that's new. What else?
And can I ask on the follow-up agreements that you have here, will those be presented at the same quarter that you're doing them? So right when you conclude them, you'll be presenting them to council?
If they're presented the same quarter that we review them,
Yes.
if we start them early in the quarter, we do have an opportunity to complete them and bring them to FOIC. Yes, we'll do that. If we start a follow-up at the tail end of a quarter, it might jump to another quarter for the completion time. So It just depends, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Representative Nino.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Montiel, and also Liz and the entire team for going through and meeting with us and breaking everything down from our priorities. I do remember the previous auditor said, what is it that keeps you up at night? So we sat there and brainstormed a lot, and thank you for doing the risk assessment as well with us and just going over some of the risk assessments that you all did and putting this presentation together. Okay.
Representative Maldonado Rocha.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Liz and Miguel. You were able, we had a long discussion about quantifying the work that you all do, that it takes to prepare to get ready for FOAC meetings every month. I asked you to quantify that for me. You did. I appreciate it. It really allows us to see the amount of work that goes into the preparation that it takes for you and your team to prepare for these meetings. I have one question.
Yes, sir.
So if I'm adding up the information correctly, and I could be wrong, for quarter 1 through quarter 4, I'm showing that you all would have a total of, forgive me if I'm wrong, 6,860 hours for the year of what you all have allocated, or what you have itemized for each audit. If I look at the one that's required quarterly, which was on that, almost the last slide of it, it looks like that would total about 4,260 hours, roughly. That's what's required quarterly, and that includes all preparation for FOAC as well. So if you are allotted 12,780 hours, is that correct? 12,780 is what you've allowed for audits, and 6,860 is what is required for quarter 1 through quarter 4. 4,260 is the 4 quarters of the quarterly work. Then it looks like you would have about 1,660 left. Did I do that right?
Oh.
Sorry to put you on, I'm sorry. I know, sorry to put you on the spot like that. I just want to make sure that we allocate all of the hours, especially because now we're allocating in those hours for the preparation for FOAC.
Right.
I want to make sure that we also make sure that we include all applicable hours that are available in what you're showing in that line, or number 1 of slide 5. In what you're being allotted, or what you're allotting yourselves to for your capacity. Your capacity is 12,780 hours,
yes,
right? So I want to make sure that we maximize that if all possible. Maybe there's a chance to add 3 additional audits if that's the case. If you can just go back and look at that for me. And just confirm my math, please, because my eyes are a little tired right now. So
we do allow approximately, depends on the quarter, between 400 and maybe 500 hours on contingency, those unplanned hours.
Right.
So we leave that as reserve in
That's
case
the extra.
new stuff comes up. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes.
so that the difference would be about 1,100 roughly if we add that additional 5 in to just, ad hoc request or
Right.
another
Yes,
audit
ma'am.
that comes up. So just take a look at it if you could for me, and that way we can make sure that we just maximize the full capacity of what your team has available. I would really appreciate it. But thank you again for coming up and really giving us the number of what it takes to prep and including that. I think it's super important because we can't afford any additional people, right, Mr. Cortines? Okay. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
I always appreciate your napkin math, Representative Maldonado Rocha. It's amazing.
My back can't.
One question that I did have based on what Representative Maldonado Rocha was kind of speaking about, we have 8.75 full-time staff members, and we're supposed to be at 10? Or did they
Our
take that?
staffing table allows 10.
10, because you had one person leave, right?
Yes.
And then 0.75 is based on the new
Chief
auditor.
internal auditor being out first quarter of the year, yes.
Okay, so then you still have capacity to get to 10?
Yes.
Yes,
So-
okay. I think just to comment a little bit on the 500 hours per quarter on FOAC, it's been a year of growth overall. The way we have set expectations in terms of how to do these meetings, we didn't have presentations, and I think at some point in the spring there was all hands on deck. Every single person that worked in the internal auditor's department was working on different presentations, and I think there could be a lot more efficiencies in that sense, and I think we could work through on that to not be spending so much time on the 500 hours, right? And so we'll kind of tackle that more as we have more of a sense of the leadership that will take over the department as the chief internal auditor. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know that number sticks out a lot. And I also wanted to appreciate the way this risk assessment was taken into account and how we developed this plan, and there was everybody's input into this, and I appreciate how you put that together and explained each one of those things. And just so we also have this conversation and it's on the record, the single family owner occupied renovation program audit, our past chief internal auditor had a conflict of interest associated with this. That started the conversation around needing to get external auditors on call, and we're working through that process with purchasing to get somebody on call on that. But the chief internal auditor is no longer employed with the city of El Paso, so that's why this is coming in, and now it can be done by the chief internal audit department or the internal audit department, because that is no longer there, but we still need to have somebody on call, and we're moving that through the process. So I just wanted to make that very clear. And then I appreciate that you thought of including the 250 hours that will be necessary for an economic development, follow-up audit, just in case we took the action that we took today, and that's where we ended up. And that was through healthy discussion. So if you need to kind of look at what feedback we gave today, and based on the motion and the action that was taken, if that needs to increase or decrease, please let us know on that, just so we have that idea before this goes to council, that there was a pending action, the action took place, now we're here on that. But other than that, I think it's really adequate that we're doing these different audits, and I appreciate what Representative Chavez said earlier on all of these high risk, and that's also important that we're picking audits and we're putting them into an audit plan that are with a lot of intentionality, because we're not just picking it out of the sky and we're saying we want to audit this department. There's a process behind that, and that's what's really important about FOAC and internal audit, and the independence and the transparency and the accountability. That all has to come together. So
Yes, sir.
thank you for all of that. Is there any other discussion on this? Okay, I will take a motion. There's a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, that passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you so much. Is there a motion? There's a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. No one opposed. That passes unanimously as well, and we'll adjourn this meeting at 4:17. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know this was longer, but the discussion was also great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.